I want to talk about overpowered characters, specifically with respect to the Undertale fandom. I've been doing an essay series for a long time called True Boundless God Flawless that sort of criticizes the ways people try to make their characters overpowered. And just the whole, idea of power scaling in general, being a reason why people make overpowered characters. And for the longest time, they've all been just essays that I've written in text on Reddit and GitHub because one of them was too long. So this will be my first time doing one of these as an actual video. Today we'll be diving into OP God 404. Yeah, I think you can already see where this is going. So let's get straight into this. Embodiment and concept of omnipotence. So there are several issues with this, besides the obvious grammar issue. Does the person who wrote this know what embodiment means? Because this implies that he is literally the concept of omnipotence in the form of an Undertale AU character, which conflicts with pretty much all other mentions of omnipotence in any other character. Also, I see this he is beyond all stuff a lot in regards to omnipotence, when I don't think that's explicitly part of omnipotence's definition. And I used to use the stone paradox to call out omnipotence, but I've since realized that what the stone paradox is basically asking is, can an omnipotent being cause itself to no longer be omnipotent? To which the answer is yes, it can. An omnipotent and immutable being, on the other hand, is different, but even then one could argue that it's not the being itself changing, it's the context in which it exists. However, omnipotence does cause problems with this character's next ability, omniscience, because of the fact that omniscience requires predetermination, which is in direct conflict with omnipotence. Also, it's really hard to characterize fourth wall omniscience. There's nothing wrong with the ability, it's just that it can't be portrayed accurately to its fullest extent. How the rest of this has been going, you might expect me to have some complaints about omnipresence. But actually, no, I don't really have any. It's probably the most reasonable of the Omni abilities. This is because it's a natural extension of being an Overmind, which, if you don't know, refers to being able to have multiple avatars in different places at once, which I also refer to as being polykistic here. Which also justifies this, because Overminds tend to not be able to die in the same way as non-Overminds can. Though I do have a complaint about this particular phrasing of the ability. That is, notice how it says invincibility, immortality, indestructibility, invulnerability. That's an example of what I like to call an LA, or list of alternates. It's a common recurring theme in overpowered characters, and is likely done so that people can't use synonyms to force exceptions. So then that gets into the more fundamental problem of designing your character around power scaling. Oh boy. This is a really long ability, but there's really only one major thing to talk about with it, and that is assumptions. A lot of powerless tend to make assumptions about various things, and at least in the Undertale context, some of these assumptions may or may not be justified. So let's just go through a list of all the assumptions this particular ability makes. That the Override ability applies outside Underverse. That reincarnation has any use given omnipresence. That the save ability applies in all AUs. That all beings have numerical skills and stats. That all beings' skills and stats can be reset. That all AUs have a similar chronology to Undertale in that in all AUs, a human fell into a place called the Underground as a significant point in the AU's timeline. That Ink Sands is chronologically derived from Undertale Sands. That all outcodes have code. That all outcodes' code is necessarily corrupted. That removing someone's code kills them. So a lot of these are nowhere near true if you actually look into them, and especially if you look at the code aspects of it. Do the Dogs of Future Past characters have code? The answer is no, because they're only in a webcomic, not in the game, meaning that the property of a being having code is more dependent on the medium the story is being viewed through than the actual nature of the universe itself. And since EUC has no currently canonical game, that means that there is no situation in which my characters have code. So are they immune to these code-based abilities? And even for the code-based stuff I do have for EUC, which is the Scratch Project versions of the EUC Last Breath animations, removing the code is necessarily a non-canon event that just freezes the animation. And even if it was canon, it wouldn't be doing anything to Sans himself, just the way we see him. And most multiverse stuff tends to ignore the fact that there's a player in most of the AUs that have fan games anyway. So this next ability references regular Era 4's previous abilities, specifically the Dark Blaster, which I won't get into here. The main complaint here is that this person probably doesn't know how big a Googleplex is. And also there is a weird terminology quirk with these abilities that I want to get into, which is this ability allows, which makes it seem less like a natural description of a character's abilities, and more like a list of abilities in terms of buttons you can press in the game to do stuff, which I find a rather unnatural way of referring to it. This is another big one, at least it's not as insane as the other one we went through before. And also, here is the focus of the power scaling centric ability design. The section I've highlighted here makes this rather obvious, as in the event that this character is power scaled with another character that's supposedly stronger, the author can pull out this ability to automatically win. Besides the LA, the other main complaint I have with this is, didn't you say that this character was omnipotent? If that's the case, why the cooldown? Can't he just remove it with his existing powers? Did this kid seriously just change his mind about the abilities of his OC halfway through? And for this next ability, honestly, elements in this context are rather poorly defined. Like, sometimes elements have symbolic associations, sometimes they include different things. Like, what exactly falls under the element of Earth? And there's no way that light element actually represents light-based powers, especially given the darkness element right next to it. Come on, where can I find a character with light powers that can form mirages and illusions and stuff like that? Where's my character that can literally manipulate magnetism, because that's literally what light is? Honestly, this is most likely just copied from some power list somewhere, with the way Earth/Ground is listed. For this ability, I have one main problem and several smaller ones. The main issue is that Freeze has two definitions and I don't know which one this ability uses. It seems like it sort of has elements of both, but like in that case, why is it listed as a single ability? Also, fire is not intangible, in fact, it's very tangible. Maybe it's intangible energy metaphysically, but in that case you need to specify it. And I doubt a person knows any of what they're talking about with this quantum effects and whatnot. So, oh boy, this ability. So first of all, this character's omnipotent, so I'm assuming all of the specifics here are just his preference. And here we get to the old immovable object unstoppable force conundrum, which power scalers solve by adding multiple tiers of immovable and unstoppable, which leads to something I like to call the otherwise problem. Which is where, now that these tiers are in place and words like unkillable now refer to specific tiers of defenses rather than a character actually being unkillable, we get semantic awkwardness like he can kill unkillable being, which, if interpreted completely semantically, as it honestly should be he can kill otherwise unkillable beings. And it's just something I like pointing out whenever it pops up because it makes everything look silly. I don't think it's appeared yet here, but I just wanted to explain it. And also, can we talk about this omniversal stuff? Because that is really the great phenomenon of power scaling. It's more of the tiers that I talked about previously, but applied to universes as well. And I honestly don't think there's a clear definition for most of them. The most useful thing they can do is be nice lyrics to a rap song. Universe, multiverse, omniverse, metaverse, chronoverse, numberverse, outerverse, setaverse, xenoverse, megaverse, superverse, hyperverse, okaverse, ultraverse, sortaverse, kindaverse. So for this next ability, what's anti-void? Or is it anti-void magic or anti-void magic? But also, why is it even called magic to begin with? If it's some kind of established system, which it is in most fantasy settings including Undertale, then why are we calling it magic? I get that Undertale does, but that's just because Undertale is specifically designed to riff on RPG tropes. So after this are a couple abilities they have absolutely no comment on, and a couple abilities they only have a tiny amount of commentary on. However, there is this attack where even the author themselves seems unsure of what could overpower it, even though its power itself is only described as tremendous. And honestly, that is a creative way of specifying an ability being overpowered, but I'd rather a bit more clarification. So this ability is just goofy. It's like the "this ability allows" phenomenon, but just like the entire world does it, not just one ability, suggesting that power levels in-universe do work in the form of discrete abilities. Which honestly isn't a good idea, since it loses out on ability variations, implied abilities, combos, and all sorts of cool stuff. And like, other than that, this is just omnipotence, so I feel like this solely exists to clarify that abilities work in that discrete manner. So the first thing I want to talk about with this ability is another terminology quirk, where you can see the possible and impossible, limited and unlimited stuff. Like, it's especially weird when it exists or does not exist, because if it doesn't exist, then why do you need to mention it? But even just here, it's still kind of unnecessary. But also, manipulating concepts is weird. Like, what if the concepts aren't metaphysical? What if it's like our world and the concepts are just patterns that can redevelop regardless of how they're manipulated? Like, I assume the ability still works, but like, what effect does it actually have? And while we're on the topic, why are conscious beings always the ones with these abilities? Something I don't think really anyone has thought to question previously, but it's something I genuinely want to know. Are all these abilities actually native? Have these characters been using tools and gadgets the whole time? Anyway, next ability. Seriously? This ability is completely unnecessary. In case you didn't know, as per the omnipresence mentioned previously, OP God 404 is an overmind. And not only that, but he's an overmind on a metaphysical basis. As such, it follows that his core consciousness should be completely inaccessible and indestructible. It even says he's indestructible here, which I would assume refers to his consciousness, because why would avatars need to hide that property? As such, it follows that the situation in which this reincarnation ability would take effect cannot occur. Okay, now we're done with this. I am pretty well versed in higher dimensional space, and I can tell you that that is not how the fourth dimension works. Or at least that our universe is three-dimensional and that there aren't any macroscopic hidden dimensions. For example, it's why gravity follows an inverse square law. So yeah, this ability just doesn't work in most cases. So there are several issues with this. Evil according to what morality, first of all? I have some societies in my science fiction settings that would consider regular humans to be evil, even though of course we consider ourselves to be good in general. Second of all, omnimalevolence conflicts with omnipotence. And thirdly, this is an example of a more general trope that I've noticed, where it seems to be implying that being evil somehow makes him more powerful, which is like okay-ish for thematic purposes, and that's likely where he got it, but for power scaling, an actual analysis of this shows that evil does not actually correlate with power level, despite what Power Levels Pro might tell you. So, this ability. What do you mean fundamental force that all powers are created from? My power to make this video definitely doesn't come from that. So first of all, why does absorbing the human souls give him the ability to do 10 to the 699 minus 1 damage? Like, Azrael's attack says infinite, but that's just because Kara is obsessing over Azrael's OC. And also, which human souls? There are definitely a lot more than 7 in the multiverse. Oh wait, he just makes it not matter by contradicting all of how souls are established to work. Honestly, the nature of souls is so hotly debated in the Undertale community that multiversal characters should honestly not be using powers like this unless it's specifically specified which AU they're taking it from. And also, given he's already this overpowered, I doubt human souls would make it different. Okay, here's a fusion. I strongly believe that if you make a fusion, you should give it its own character page, or at least character profile. Maybe it's just the Steven Universe fan in me talking, but I just hate how in a lot of media, fusions are just treated like transformations of one of their components. But also, did Toby Fox sign up for this? I don't think he did. So this is the final ability, and my main complaint with this one is he's an omnipresent overmind, so why the shuck are the clones fake? So yeah, there are a lot of problems with the ways overpowered characters is designed. And I feel like most of them come down to a power-scaling focused design philosophy, which results in all the weird meta-references and nonsensical semantic. Like, you don't need to do that, just make your character omnipotent and decanonize anything stronger in your AU. And sometimes I feel like the ability lists are just too long for the authors to keep track of, or the authors don't know the actual implications of the abilities they're assigning to the characters, which results in all the weird things being unnecessary because of overmind stuff. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about, so goodbye! And make sure to check out the other True Boundless God Flawless posts on my Reddit profile.